Hello there, and welcome to a very special episode of Electric Sheep. This is our 163 subscriber special. Um, Without any further delay, here is the story titled Lovely Brute.
Lovely brute. The Marmala had no war. They had no physical conflict at all. No scars, no weapons, no reflex to strike. Their bodies did not register pain as other species did. Damage was information, not suffering. A torn limb was an inconvenience. A pierced organ, a problem to be solved. Because of this, violence never took root in them. There was no instinct that demanded retaliation. No chemical storm that cried hurt them before they hurt you. From this absence, the Marmala grew certain ideas about the universe. Other races, they believed, were crude and unfinished, civilizations still trapped in the animal spiral of fear and dominance. The Marmala watched them from afar with cool fascination, cataloging wars the way one might catalog storms or volcanic eruptions, destructive, dramatic, and ultimately irrational. Still, they studied. They studied because understanding was the Marmala's highest virtue. They observed conflicts across 1,000 worlds, replayed them in simulation halls, slowed them down to the twitch of a finger on a trigger or the flex of a jaw before a scream. Yet one thing always eluded them. Why would a being weigh its own physical health over another's? Why would it choose to harm rather than yield? Why defend a body that could so easily be repaired, replaced, or abandoned? Self-defense, as a concept, failed to resolve into anything meaningful. Pain was not persuasive to the Marmala. Death, when it came, was accepted as a transition rather than a terror. Violence seemed not only immoral, but unnecessary, an inefficient equation with needless variables. Until Dr. Etra Nort spoke. Etra was unremarkable in form, like all Marmala, but her mind was restless in a way others were not. She had spent more cycles studying interspecies conflict than anyone alive, not just watching the battles, but listening to the songs, the myths, the silences that followed the killing. And one cycle she called a great gathering of minds. They assembled beneath the luminous arches of the thought hall, thousands of Marmala interlinked in quiet expectation. No one shouted for attention. No one needed to. Etra stepped forward, and the hall stilled. Without preamble, she displayed an image. It was a war's end. Smoke hung low over a torn plain. Bodies lay scattered like discarded tools. At the center stood a warrior, blood-soaked, breathing hard, muscles trembling with exhaustion. In his hands were the severed heads of his enemies, lifted high for all to see. A ripple of discomfort moved through the hall. Etra let the image remain. "It is violence," she said calmly, "but it is not senseless." She expanded the scene. The warrior was not alone. Survivors gathered. The heads were not discarded. They were treated with care, cleaned, adorned. Resources were divided among those still standing. The fallen were named, their deeds recounted. Around a fire, their deaths became stories. Meaning was forged where chaos had been. "You see barbarism," Etra continued, "because you see only the act. But watch the system." She shifted the image again, youths standing apart, witnessing the ritual. For them, this violence was passage. Not indulgence, not cruelty, but transformation, the proving of capacity, the acceptance of responsibility, the terrible agreement that survival demanded cost. "Their violence," Etra said, "exists for the same reason we abandoned it." The hall pulsed with confusion. "Survival," she clarified. "Not of the individual alone, but of traits, of cohesion, of the tribe." She turned back to the image of the warrior, frozen in that moment of grim triumph. They feel pain. They fear death. Their bodies do not forgive injury as ours do. For them, violence is not a flaw in reasoning. It is an adaptation, a negotiation with extinction. Etra faced the gathered minds. "I do not see an unreasonable monster," she said, and there was genuine appreciation in her tone. "I see a being shaped by necessity, honoring enemies because they mattered enough to threaten survival. I see a culture that remembers its dead so they may continue to serve the living." The image faded. "In choosing peace," Etra concluded, "we proved that survival can be achieved without violence, for us. In choosing violence, they proved the same, for them." She paused, then added softly, almost fondly, "I see this warrior triumph, and I do not recoil. I see a lovely brute."
Well, I really like that story. Um, think it's a really good example of human and AI working off of each other, because it is worded quite differently than the way I did, but I think it got some ideas across a little bit clearer. And where I had said that the Marmala don't feel pain, ChatGPT added that they can easily repair damage and can get a new body very easily. And what that means exactly, does that mean that they have transcended death in a way, and it's not an inevitability, or death is a simple transition to another body? Um, I don't completely comprehend it, but I think it sounds very interesting and very alien, which is the aim of the game there. And I had very few descriptors for the Marmala and for the warring species they were viewing. You could picture just about anything there. I just mentioned that he was holding heads and he's covered in blood, but insert whatever creature or man or woman that I think I might have had him referred to as a man, so maybe it's a man. Um, but then again, this is an alien species viewing them, so they may not comprehend our genders as well as they think they do. So who knows how they might refer to a man or a woman that they had never seen before. Um, yeah. Um, I always like the juxtaposition of peaceful and warring cultures, because they seem so utterly different. But when you can kind of find what the common ground is between those cultures, maybe you can find common ground between cultures here on Earth that are surprisingly less different than just peace culture and war culture, where we don't really have that here. Well, I'm not saying there aren't people who don't like war, but I would say every culture, for the most part, has people on both sides. People who promote war, people who promote peace. Maybe some cultures are a little more warring than others, but I don't really want to comment specifically because that's usually prejudice, because you speak from your own perspective and you say, well, those guys look really violent over there, but I don't really know what it is to live over there. I'm going from my perspective, from my media, and I'm not going to assume that's correct. So why comment on it at all most of the time? I try to be non-political, but I think sometimes you have to comment on things like the state of North Korea is a little bit scary as far as I understand it, but I also understand that the way they portray the rest of the world is very far from the truth. And so, why am I to assume that my media is any less biased? Um, I don't believe anything I'm told. I just take in the information and consider it as information, and consider what it would mean for it to be true, what it would mean for it to be false. But I'm just rambling now. So I hope you enjoyed this story. Um, I like the way it turned out. I'm going to try to get another episode in today. My name is Joseph Arthur Roszell. You might know me as Captain Canada. I want to thank you for watching. I want to wish you all the luck in the world. I love you, and I want you to know that suicide is never the answer. Peace out. For now.